Hello, attendees of our upcoming Executive Planning Day. My name is Josephine Lowe, and today I'll be summarizing, explaining, and exploring 4 topics for our leaders at the Executive Planning Day. Our first topic is the macroeconomy and understanding the business cycle, which is best understood once we break down our key macroeconomic indicators. Firstly, the unemployment rate, which is the percentage of people in the labor force who are willing and able to work but are unable to find work. This indicates current labor market conditions, provides insights into the economy's performance and the social well-being of our economy. Secondly, inflation, which is the increase in the level of prices of household goods and services. It is measured by the Consumer Price Index, which captures the price changes in an average basket of goods and services households typically consume. Lastly is our gross domestic product, which measures total production of goods and services in the economy and is calculated by the Australian Bureau of Statistics. Changes in GDP over time is modeled by the business cycle, which depicts these fluctuations of economic growth in Australia. Increases to these indicators have different effects. For unemployment, an increase means the business cycle is contracting due to less people being employed. For inflation, an increase reflects growing demand, which means higher prices and thus an expanding business cycle. And lastly, for increasing GDP, due to being the y-axis of the business cycle, will indicate growing economic activity. The inverse can be expected for a decrease in these indicators, with a decrease in unemployment reflecting an expansion, for inflation a contraction as demand reduces and lower prices as spending falls, and lastly for decreasing GDP, weaker levels of economic growth as there is a reduced economic output due to less goods and services being produced by firms. Whilst all of this may seem confusing, understanding the economic conditions of our economy is important at the Australian Ballet, because the business cycle not only reflects our key macroeconomic indicators, but also human emotions and attitudes. For example, during an expansion, there may be feelings of optimism and excitement that might increase attendeeship at ballet performances and a greater willingness to spend disposable income on things like entertainment. Whilst in a contraction, there might be feelings of fear and desperation to save money for needs rather than spending on funds. Overall, the business cycle is essential to understand so informed business decision making can be made, and adequate planning can be done in preparation for these fluctuations in economic growth. Recently, Trump has imposed a tax on its biggest importers, Australia being one of them, as we export our goods and services to the US. From our perspective in Australia, these tariffs will have an effect on our aggregate demand and supply. Aggregate demand will shift to the left as there is a decrease due to net export factors, those being the fact that foreign income will decrease in Australia as the US will import less from Australia and Australia will export less commodities to the US, versus the effect that it will have on the US, which in short-term aggregate supply will shift to the left as production for firms in the US will become more expensive as the commodities they may import to use in factors of production will increase due to the tariffs that consumers and businesses in the US will have to pay. The tariffs imposed by the US alongside growing trade tensions impact the Australian economy both directly and indirectly, as the commodities we export, like steel and aluminum, are subjected to higher tariffs, and goods and services we import from our other trading partners like China are also impacted. Australia's business environment will change because of these tariffs, because we are such a large exporter with a significant portion of our economy being driven by trade. Although these tariffs have caused uncertainty, it is likely that we will experience a weaker economy in the coming future. Thankfully, these escalating trade tensions play a very minor role in the ballet industry in Australia. But that does not make tariffs and the implications in our economy any less important to understand, as the industry the Australian ballet operates in heavily relies on the optimism of its consumers, which is unlikely to flourish in times of growing trade tensions. Although few, some positives of the tariffs is that Australia is less likely to be directly affected in a large manner by the US. However, the impact will be more indirect, as the negatives include our biggest commodity having a 50% tariff attached to it when exporting to the US, meaning our metal producers and miners will suffer losses and overall global supply chains will be hugely disrupted. For a long time, economists assumed that people will always make rational and well-informed decisions. But we now know that that isn't always true, and that people make irrational decisions all the time. This is known as behavioral economics, which studies how human psychology influences business decision making. In most cases, people will behave rationally and make predictable and consistent decisions. But sometimes there are limits on information and time that help us make decisions. This is known as bounded rationality. These exceptions to the laws of demand and supply explain why there can never be a 100% definitive forecast in economics, despite these laws that suggest otherwise. The difference is that traditional economics expects consumers to behave with self-interest and satisfaction maximization as their goal whilst decision making. But in reality, the principles of behavioral economics exists, and it emphasizes how we make irrational and illogical decisions sometimes. For example, if the price of frozen yogurt decreases, then demand should increase, as per the law of demand. However, people demand less of the frozen yogurt because they believe this low price means it is bad quality and tastes bad. The concept of behavioral economics can help explain why people choose unhealthy food options over healthier ones. Why do people eat unhealthy food when there are healthier options? Well, just like in economics, we expect decision makers to be well informed and with self interest. Therefore, it will make logical sense that people should eat healthy foods, because we know that healthy foods contain the necessary nutrients we need to fuel our bodies and support our development and avoid illness and disease. But in reality, we know this isn't true because of the unhealthy foods we consume all the time. From fast food to sugary sweets, people eat food that is deemed unhealthy, despite knowing that there may be healthier options out there. This is because there are so many factors beyond the rational human mind that goes into making decisions, like our human emotions and our cognitive biases and social norms that can go against what may seem logical. So, next time you eat something unhealthy and feel that regret or guilt, aside from those caused by stomach troubles, it may be that cognitive dissonance we experience when we realize that we are doing something that isn't rational. But that is completely okay because unhealthy food in moderation is okay. Our last topic today is developments in AI and the implications for inequality in the labor market. The impact of AI on the labor market is a complicated one, as it is both creating and replacing jobs in different areas of our economy. Whilst AI includes the rapid introduction of generative AI and large language models, the increase in automation too poses benefits and threats to the labor market. This means that developments in AI have both cognitive and physical implications onto our economy and has various effects on inequality. Developments in AI can reduce wage inequality as it provides lower skilled workers opportunities to work more effectively and thus increase production. However, AI also increases wage inequality as it also boosts productivity of high skilled workers whilst leaving lower skilled workers redundant and being replaced by AI. In the short term, AI and automation will boost productivity and output, but it will also exacerbate wage inequality as low-skilled workers are replaced by efficient and cost-effective AI-induced technologies. However, in the long run, these effects can be mitigated as workers are trained on how to use and harness these artificial intelligence, which will avoid redundancy as they keep up with the rapid developments in AI. The short-term effects is illustrated in the diagram below, as in the short term, supply of labor will decrease due to the developments in AI, replacing low-skilled labor through automation, thus resulting in a leftward shift of the supply curve. There will also be a leftward shift in demand for labor as there is less workers needed to fulfill the same tasks, which is reflected by the fact that wage for workers remains the same whilst the quantity decreases. Thank you so much, leaders, for listening to my presentation for the